Hey, Dan Tinquist here. Welcome back to the Confidad podcast. So glad that you chose to join us again today. We'll begin today like we do every single episode with our fatherhood mindset. Say it out loud with me. I'm the only one who can fulfill the father role I have, so I choose to do it well. I get to show up well for my kids. Imperfection is reality. Ownership is a choice. Today is brand new, and so is tomorrow. I'm wholly loved, so I will love wholly. Today in our equipping section, we're going to go deep. If we agree with this statement, there's no such thing as a perfect father, then we also agree with the statement that we fail. The fact that failure is part of who we are as dads, part of what our experience has been, our kids' experience has been, that is not the most important thing. It is true. It's a fact. We have failed. We are not perfect. The most important part about failure is understanding what are you doing with your failure. We see this in business. We see this in like self-actualization stuff all the time where it's good to be aware of your failures. It's good to embrace the failure, move through the failure. I think it's a lot harder in fatherhood. And I'll tell you why. When you fail a business, when you fail like even a friendship, maybe you failed a marriage, there's always an opportunity for another business. There's opportunity for another friendship and even opportunity for another marriage. But if you fail with your kids, there's really no other option. There's no other opportunity. You sure could have another kid or adopt or something like that. But there's nothing in the world that can replace your child. And being able to move from having failed forward is extremely important. It's a very important skill. A lot of dads that I see, they don't even feel the permission to accept the failure or to admit the failure. They just kind of brush it under the rug and move on and pretend like either it didn't happen or maybe say, yeah, I'm sorry, and move on really fast. But have you learned from it? Have you grown from it? Has it become a moment where you said, I am never going to let this happen again? Maybe you do let it happen again, but you're finding ways to move forward. You're finding ways to not let the failure define you, but to refine you. So let's talk a little bit more about this and why. Why is it so hard for us men to fail forward in parenting? I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that most of us have never been taught key core milestones from our own childhood. David Thomas and Sissy Goff have a great podcast called Are My Kids on Track? And in it, they're talking about the different milestones that kids need to be brought through, that we as parents have the job of bringing our kids through. Okay, so it's like emotional milestones, social milestones, and spiritual milestones for those people who practice Christianity. The emotional ones are all about emotional vocabulary, perspective, empathy, and resourcefulness. Those are the four emotional ones. I'm willing to bet that most men that are listening to this podcast have struggled to name their emotions when they feel them. Emotions are not something that we deal with well. We don't talk about them very easily. And even when we do, we maybe don't even have the right vocabulary around them. And so before you can even teach your kids emotional vocabulary and build those emotional milestones, you've got to learn them. Or I guess you could just let your wife do it, but that doesn't feel like very much of a team. And then the boys in your home will grow up to believe that like dads don't talk about emotions and only the women do. Sound familiar? Do you want to raise confident, healthy, interdependent adults, like launch them into the world with like the most tools that you can, the right tools, the things that they have? If that's the case, then we can't just assume that mom can take care of all the other provision and we just do the money stuff. We have to be able to model and live out what it looks like to fail forward, as well as all these other milestones. Maybe for you, you're like, okay, well, I don't have them, so I guess I'll just figure it out, or maybe my kid can do better than I did. Or you can join a community where you can learn about this. You can learn about emotional vocabulary, perspective, empathy, resourcefulness. Exactly what we are doing in the Confidad community. Would love to have you join in there and start to grow and build those muscles so that you can show up well for your kids, not just when you go to work to provide, but when you come home. How are you showing up emotionally? How are you showing up socially? what is happening in your mind, heart, body when you're with your kids. Are you aware of what's going on? Are you focused on work still? Like, what's happening there? And we want to help equip and empower you to be able to show up well in both situations, right? So back to this question about failure. So we know it's true. We know the most important part of it is what you do with the failure now that you have it. So the question is, where are you failing as a dad? Where are you failing is the first question. Maybe just jot down one or two things. You don't need to have a laundry list, just a few things. The next question is, what are you doing about it? Like, what actions have you taken on those failures? Have you owned your mistake, apologized, and repaired? Those are really important things within relationships. If we're talking about building strong bridges, that's like leaving a crack in a bridge and just being like, I'm just going to paint over it. It'll be just fine. That paint doesn't cover it. Neither does like shorthanded apology just to move past it. That's like painting a crack in a bridge. How many cracks do you have? How much paint have you used at? To believe the lie that you can't repair, no matter how old your kids are, that's just a lie, okay? Forgiveness and repair and that type of understanding, like owning your part, owning your mistakes, that is a huge part of repair. And learning how to do that well is powerful. And you have no control over how the other person receives your apology. If they do forgive you, you have no control over how people act after you've forgiven them. It's not the point. The point is that like we have to do the work for repair as men. And no matter what the outcome is, no matter what the response is, it's our job to take that step forward. So maybe you're failing as a dad because you feel like it's just so busy. You just got so many things going on and you have to go to this activity and that activity and the other activity. I've had a few dads talk to me about just how busy they are. They're like, I'd love to do something more with my kids, but I'm just so busy. And the reality is like, yeah, you're busy, but how much time do you spend doing other things? How much time do you spend on that app on your phone or playing that game or reading that newspaper or watching the games? The reality is we have time. It's just how we're prioritizing it. And so this plan for what we're doing about it, the plan for how we're handling our failure and how we're growing from it has to include prioritization. We have to prioritize what we're doing and how we're spending our time so that we can show up well, not just at work, not just with our buddies, but show up well for our kids. You know, taking a deep breath before we get home, like the coming home reset we talked about a few weeks back, that's a great way to show up well for your kids. That's a great way to go, okay, I've screwed up before. I've come home and just kind of put my feet up and vegged out, and I'm not going to do that anymore. Maybe that's your failure and you have a plan now of executing the coming home reset. It's great. But without any type of prioritization, without any type of understanding, slowing down and going, okay, what do I really want? Like, what kind of family culture do I really want? Do I want to be able to come home and love what I'm experiencing, to enjoy spending time with all of my family, to be able to not just hang my hat on the hook and be like, I've provided for the day, I've done my job, now I'm just going to clock out. If you're doing that, it's a very hard path forward because the bridge will not be built very strongly and the connection will just kind of crumble and dissolve. And I think that's why so many parents struggle with teenagers, because teenagers are looking for a safe, steady place to land in the midst of all of the changes going on within their bodies, with their friend groups, with their brains. Like, everything that's happening for them is so chaotic that they're just looking for a safe place. And a lot of times the tension and the conflict with teenagers comes out because they don't know how to handle what's going on inside their bodies. They're learning, what is it like to live inside this new body? What does it look like to live as an adult? They're getting more freedom, they're getting less structure, and they have to manage their own time and resources more. And that's a lot to learn, right? Like, think back to when you were a teenager. It's an interesting time of life to be growing and changing. And so why do parents and teenagers butt heads so much? I mean, I don't have all the answers. Of course I don't. But I think a lot of it has to do with, like, if mom and dad are safe, if mom and dad are steady, if they are rock hard in the sense of they have something to stand on there, that's going to feel safe to the teenager. And I don't mean rigid. I don't mean like, very, very strict boundaries, blah, blah, blah. I mean, like, can they come to you when they're struggling? Can they come to you when they screwed up and not worry about being judged or yelled at? Or, discipline is totally different. We still discipline our kids. When our kids break the rules, especially teenagers, there's still consequences. Discipline matters, but how we discipline our kids matters just as much as that we're disciplining them. Because if your way of discipline communicates something that does not feel safe, they will find other places to go. Like most of this stuff, these soft skills, this is a dance. This is an art. You figure out your kid. That's why it's so important to work through the time well spent method and understand family culture framework at a younger age, because as they get into the teenage years, it's easier to know who they are and know what makes them click, know what makes them blow up. And you're able to navigate those waters a little bit easier because you have those tools. You've already been there. You have the map. You know who they are. And so as they grow and change and new things come and new challenges come, I'm never saying it's going to be easy, but understanding that knowing your kids and who they are is one of the best ways to help create that safe space, right? So like I was saying, priority matters. What kind of family you want matters. And that vision and dream for your family has to drive the actions that you take today. So this week, I want to empower you to look ahead. When you fail this week, write it down, journal it out that night. Be like, this was my biggest parenting fail today. Just write one. Don't write a bunch, okay? And then after that, say, what am I going to do about it? Do I have to repair? Do I have to apologize and repair this relationship? Maybe you screwed up because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. And so now you got some work to do, right? Some ownership to happen. What is the next step? Moving from failure forward and growing from it requires initiative. It requires action on your part. We can't just sit and think about it. We can't just sit and just like, oh, I'm so sorry and I'm done. Like, we have to come up with a plan to execute so that the failure can move us forward. We'd love to have you join us in our masterclass, in what we have going on in this community of dads, because we talk about this stuff one to another in there. We talk about and encourage each other and challenge each other on how can we grow through our failures? How can we grow and become better dads, showing up better for our wives, our kids, and everyone in our lives? It has been a great place for many dads to wrestle with the hard things, to celebrate the big wins, and to move forward together, not alone, in this fatherhood journey. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.